The Special Forces team moved slowly through streets shrouded in darkness and ruins. The faint light from the armored vehicle illuminated walls pocked with bullet holes. The freezing air mixed with the acrid stench of gunpowder tightened around every breath. The sharp echo of hurried boots struck the fractured concrete in the dead silence. On the spectral display inside the command vehicle, faint blips darted at terrifying speed. They hid in every shadow. The human eye could not see them, but Mark knew they were everywhere. Suddenly, a dark figure swept across the gap between two buildings. A scream ripped through the night, then vanished into silence. The body collapsed to the ground. The skin was charred as if burned by fire. The organs inside were frozen solid like ice. The blood had thickened into dense black clots. Cold sweat gathered on Mark's forehead. His fingers locked around the grip of the device. His heartbeat pounded in his ears, counting down to the moment of death. This was no longer a battlefield for humans. This was the hunting ground of the invisible beings called Umin. And to learn where these creatures came from, we must return to the beginning of one of the most brutal experiments in the history of science. It was the most brutal experiment in human scientific history since the days of Unit 731. This time the subjects were living human beings. The researchers first scanned an entire human body at the molecular level. Then they used a material known as Bose-Einstein-Thay-V condensate, a rare state of matter formed at absolute zero, to print the exact human form. From that process, the entities known as Umin were born. Their existence had already gone beyond life and death. They endured endless agony, yet possessed the power to crush anything. Human weapons were useless against them. Even the thickest armored tanks were destroyed in a single blow. Worse still, humans could not see them with the naked eye. Once attacked by a Umin, the victim's organs would freeze instantly while the skin would burn and corrode. In these extremes of pain, death came immediately. Some scientists still celebrated the results of their work. They did not see the danger coming. Until one day during an experiment, a catastrophic accident occurred. Umin broke free and killed the entire research team. After escaping the laboratory, they slaughtered without mercy. No one could escape their claws. The military received the report and deployed at once. But facing an enemy completely invisible, their forces fell quickly. With no other choice, the command turned to Dr. Mark. He had invented electromagnetic pulse technology and advanced spectral goggles. These devices could detect Umin. At first, technicians who reviewed the battlefield footage thought it was only interference. But 3 days earlier, a soldier had been killed and the goggles had recorded a clear video. In recent weeks, more bodies had been found across the region. All died in the same way. The locals were in panic. Intelligence suggested it might be new cloaking technology. The enemy could be using adaptive camouflage suits. Mark disagreed. He believed current technology could not achieve true invisibility. This also could not explain the strange deaths of the soldiers. Even without a clear answer, Mark believed science could explain every phenomenon. To understand Umin, more field data was needed. This time he brought a hyperspectral camera capable of detecting light frequencies invisible to the human eye. It could track Umin just like the goggles. Mark mounted the camera on an armored vehicle. He and the Special Forces entered the area where Umin had appeared. The mission was to rescue anyone still alive. The city had become a silent ruin. Once there, the team split into groups of 4 to search. They swept each building where soldiers had been killed. Mark and Agent Ivy stayed in the vehicle watching the live feed from the camera. As the search team moved deeper into one building, they found a dead soldier. The bizarre cause of death confirmed the work of Umin. The team raised their guard. While searching a room, they detected abnormal spectral readings under an overturned bathtub. Following orders, they carefully lifted it. Underneath was a soldier missing for days. His face was frozen in terror. His mind was on the edge. His voice trembled as he spoke. He said all his comrades had been killed by Umin. Their bodies were on the rooftop. Only the overturned tub had kept him alive. After hearing the survivor's story, the team moved to the rooftop. There they found the bodies of every other soldier. All had died in the exact same way. While scanning the area, Soldier Mike spotted a room at the end of the hallway. With cover from his teammates, he slipped inside to investigate. On the spectral display, Mark suddenly noticed a faint white blur appear in the middle of the room. When Mike removed his goggles, the blur vanished. Not believing his eyes, he quickly put them back on. Under the commander's signal, he opened fire on the blur. But no matter how he aimed, the bullets passed through and struck the wall. Before anyone could understand what was happening, the unexpected occurred. The commander saw Mike go down and instantly reported the Umin's position to the rest of the team. He ordered heavy rounds to be loaded to destroy the target. But before they could get a clear view, the Umin attacked first. Its assault gave them no chance to fight back. In seconds, soldiers fell one after another. Watching their comrades drop, the survivors finally pinpointed the Umin's location. They unleashed a barrage of fire. Yet even though the goggles revealed its form, their weapons could not harm it. The onslaught only made it more vicious. As casualties rose, Mark urged the commander to order a retreat before the entire team was wiped out. In the few seconds of hesitation, another wave of attacks struck them. With no way out, one soldier yanked the pin on a powerful grenade, but the wide blast did nothing to the U-Min. Only then did the commander order a withdrawal. It was already too late. No one expected that U-Min could move freely through the air. Seeing this through the spectral feed, Mark was stunned. Such a phenomenon defied any scientific explanation. His faith in science began to waver. The commander grabbed a grenade launcher and rushed outside. Mark guided him to the target using the hyperspectral camera. When the commander finally got a lock, he fired. As the smoke cleared, Mark realized the enemy was untouched. Before the commander could see it clearly, he was struck down and killed instantly. Mark was still reeling when more soldiers dropping from higher floors were cut down in seconds. Watching more comrades fall, the survivors dove into the armored vehicle to escape. They did not know this was only the beginning of the nightmare. On the way back to base, the vehicle hit a landmine planted by enemy forces. The blast killed several soldiers inside. The rest scrambled out in panic and tried to call headquarters for help. The radio had been damaged by the explosion, and the message could not get through. With no transport, they could not return to base. The only priority now was to find shelter. Soon they reached an abandoned factory and decided to stay there until reinforcements arrived, but U-Min could attack at any moment. Worse still, most of the team's spectral goggles had been destroyed in the battle. If the enemy appeared now, they would never see their own deaths coming. Mark quickly devised a plan. He ordered one soldier to climb to the highest point and aim the hyperspectral camera outside. The moment it was switched on, the sight on the screen filled them with dread. The factory was surrounded, yet the U-Min did not enter. Looking closer, the soldiers noticed something. There seemed to be an invisible boundary stopping them. Each time they tried to cross, they were blocked. One soldier remembered slipping outside earlier and had picked up some black dirt on his hand. It was metal scrap. That was why the enemy could not enter. The ground around the factory was covered in it. Mark said this was no coincidence. Someone had put it there, and that person must know the secret of U-Min. There could be someone else in the factory. The soldiers agreed and began searching. They soon found 2 children in one of the rooms. The girl said her father had scattered the metal scraps. When asked where he was, her eyes turned sad. Her father had been killed by U-Min while setting up the barrier. His body was still in the next room. They could not get more answers from the children, but Mark found a map on the father's body. It marked a place called Masarovi. This was where the U-Min killings had begun. Not long after the discovery, the last communications officer managed to restore contact with headquarters. The message came back that a helicopter would arrive at dawn to extract them. Tanks would escort the evacuation to ensure safety. The immediate threat of being trapped was resolved, but a new problem arose. The landing zone for the helicopter was 800 meters from the factory. They had to cross that distance without being detected and attacked by U-Min. As the team debated possible routes, Mark noticed the factory was filled with piles of metal scraps. An idea formed in his mind. He told the soldiers to collect every glass bottle they could find. They stuffed the bottles full of the scraps, then packed C4 into the openings, sealing them with tape. This created an explosive device that could blast shards across a wide area. It would act like shrapnel against the U-Min slowing or wounding them. Using this method, they made more weapons and even replaced bullets with ones loaded with metal fragments. At the same time, Mark modified the hyperspectral camera into a spectral spotlight that could let them see U-Min with the naked eye. He sent the design to headquarters so reinforcements could equip the same system. When preparations were complete, the team finally rested. At dawn, a guard spotted unusual movement in the building across from the factory. Mark switched on the modified spotlight. The beam swept through the ruins and revealed a horrifying sight. Unable to pass the ground barrier, the U-Min had climbed onto the opposite building. As they watched, the creatures suddenly leapt straight toward the factory. The team grabbed their gear and moved out fast, but the moment they stepped outside, they were spotted. Dozens of dark shapes rushed at them with incredible speed. In the chaos, soldiers tried to throw the prepared bombs, but hitting such fast-moving targets was nearly impossible. Seeing shells miss again and again, one soldier hurled a bomb at the ground instead. Metal fragments exploded in every direction, stopping the U-Min for a moment. The team used the brief opening to run toward the rendezvous point, but the effect did not last long. The creatures soon broke through and chased them. This time, however, the team fought while retreating. Even if a direct hit was difficult, the wide spread of fragments from each blast slowed the enemy. They used this tactic to keep moving, but the noise drew every U-Min in the area. A soldier at the rear tried to fight back but was taken down instantly by a lunging shadow. No one could stop to help. They could only keep running. At the critical moment, several bombs went off in sequence, scattering fragments everywhere and buying them a gap. They finally reached the landing zone. Just then, Mark's spotlight began to flicker. 2 days of constant use had burned it out completely. Before they could think of another plan, the sound of engines came from afar. Relief swept through the group as tanks rolled into the square. Each was equipped with a spectral spotlight. The 3 vehicles moved into position, and the soldiers thought the nightmare was ending. But when the beams lit up the surroundings, they saw the buildings packed with Umin. The tank crews turned their turrets and opened fire. The blasts shook the square so violently that retreating soldiers were thrown off their feet. Under the heavy barrage, a building erupted in flames and collapsed. As the smoke cleared, the reinforcements moved in, but inside the ruins, the creatures were unharmed. They charged forward faster than ever. One shadow slammed into a tank yet could not pass through its armor. Mark noticed this and realized something. The blocked creature grew more aggressive, ramming until the steel shell dented. The spotlight on the tank roof shattered and went dark. The U-Min slipped back into the shadows and began another killing spree. In the chaos, the little boy who had been with the girl was killed. The surviving soldiers were almost overrun when the rescue helicopter finally appeared. The downdraft from its rotor seemed to slow the creatures. Mark seized the moment, pulling the fragment bombs from his belt and throwing them down. The explosions bought enough time for the group to climb aboard. As the helicopter lifted into the sky, they escaped the killing ground for now. But the relief was short-lived. A grim message from headquarters came through the cabin. The base had been overrun. The city was now filled with U-Min. Anywhere the white glow appeared was where lives were being taken. With no other option, the pilot turned toward an emergency shelter. When they arrived, Mark led the girl inside. After days of observing the U-Min, he had formed a vague theory but needed more details. The girl told him her father had once worked as a craftsman in Masarovi building special containers. The origin of the U-Min was tied to a nuclear power plant there. At that moment, a general arrived at the shelter with a handful of surviving troops. He said that when the base was attacked, all communications were disabled. The battle was brutal. Of more than 200 stationed soldiers, fewer than 20 survived. The shelter was not much safer. Its signals had also been jammed, leaving them cut off from the outside world. Worst of all, the military still had no effective countermeasures. Mark approached the general to share his findings. He explained that the soldier who survived in the bathtub had been protected by a layer of ceramic. This was something the U-Min could not penetrate. That proved they were not natural creatures. Mark said that long ago, Einstein had predicted a fourth state of matter beyond solid, liquid, and gas known as Bose-Einstein condensate. It could only be created at absolute zero and possessed strange properties. This material was slowed by metal fragments. It could not pass through ceramic, but could move through solid walls. Because its temperature was so low, any living thing it touched would be destroyed instantly. Creating Bose-Einstein condensate required massive amounts of energy, and it was no coincidence that a nuclear power plant in Masarovi existed. That was where the U-Min were being produced. If they were man-made, they were bound by physical laws. Mark believed plasma energy weapons could break down the structure of the condensate. He proposed dismantling all the supplies the general had brought and scavenging parts from the shelter to build plasma guns. The team would have to move fast and reach Masarovi immediately. If not, the U-Min would keep absorbing energy from the surroundings, and their numbers would grow without limit. The end result would be global catastrophe. Everyone worked together, and finally the plasma rifles were ready. Each fired an energy pulse that could destroy the condensate instantly. Once preparations were complete, the team geared up and set out. A decisive battle between humanity and U-Min was about to begin. Before long, they arrived at the nuclear plant. A scout team landed first to confirm the area was clear. Once they gave the signal, the rest of the soldiers deployed. With them came a robotic dog fitted with a spectral spotlight. The formation was set, and they advanced toward the main gate. On the hyperspectral feed, they saw a large group of U-Min gathered ahead, rushing toward them at extreme speed. Soldiers raised their plasma rifles and fired. Bursts of energy tore through the attackers, disintegrating them on the spot. For the first time, the troops had actually killed the enemy. Seeing the method work, the commander ordered a full assault. From the helicopters, more soldiers descended to seize the plant. The vanguard held the U-Min at the gate while the second team pushed inside according to plan. Their objective was to find the source of the creatures. The special forces landed on the roof. Mark led a small group down through a service shaft. They had barely reached the ground floor when a fast-moving group of U-Min appeared. The team fired back, but in the narrow corridors, the creatures were faster than the bullets. One soldier signaled for Mark to fall back. They had to locate the lab that created the U-Min if they wanted to stop them. Mark ran toward the inner wing. Soon, he found a locked door. Ivy quickly picked the lock. Inside was a laboratory littered with corpses. Mark switched on his spectral spotlight. In the storage tanks ahead, dozens of U-Min floated in dormant state. Their forms were incomplete like failed prototypes. They searched the room and found a stack of X-ray films, each showing the full human body structure. The truth became clear. Scientists had scanned the bodies of living people at the molecular level, then used Bose-Einstein condensate to reassemble that data into matter. That was how the U-Min were created. As Mark and Ivy moved deeper, they were horrified to see tanks holding fully formed U-Min. Worse still, these ones seemed to possess awareness. That meant they were more than just exotic matter. Half the tanks were shattered. The roaming U-Min outside had come from here. The cause of the breach was unknown. In the corner, Mark spotted a secured device. Using an ID card he had picked up, he unlocked it. It was an emergency control system for the U-Min. If the energy link to them was severed, their neural activity would stop instantly. Mark began dismantling the connections without hesitation. Outside the plant, the battle was spiraling out of control. Plasma rifles could destroy the U-Min, but the soldiers soon realized the creatures could merge into new bodies after being shot. Each merger made them faster and more dangerous. With every transformation, they drew closer to forming a massive U-Min storm. Hundreds of entities twisted together into a single, solid black vortex. With terrifying force, it tore through defenses. Even plasma fire that had worked before now failed. Screams mixed with explosions, and the flash of energy bursts that faded into darkness. The commander ordered every remaining weapon on the field to be gathered. He intended to unleash one final strike. As the front line neared collapse, the plan was ready. A massive explosion tore apart part of the plant, destroying rows of tanks inside. The U-Min within swarmed out, joining the vortex, yet the black storm remained undiminished and continued to smash into the soldiers. In the final moments, Mark finished severing the last energy connection. Without their power source, the U-Min detonated into clouds of pale light. The shockwave hurled him to the ground. His ears rang with only the sound of wind and the pounding of his heart. Then silence. The U-Min froze in midair for a few seconds before their bodies dissolved into white mist and drifted away. The battlefield went still. The smell of burning metal hung in the air. Mark and Ivy discovered a hidden basement beneath the lab. Inside were dozens of cylindrical chambers. Within each was an unfinished U-Min. The most chilling sight was that each one had once been a human. Their bodies had been transformed into condensate matter. Their brains were removed and placed in cold life support systems. Though bodiless, the brains still functioned sustained by electric currents. The flicker of indicator lights reflected off the glass like a living graveyard. Ivy's hands clenched. Mark stood in silence, then walked to the control panel. He knew these were people imprisoned in eternal pain. Without hesitation, he cut the power. The hum of machinery ceased. Inside the chambers, the liquid began to evaporate. The brains dissolved into nothing. Silence filled the room. Mark closed his eyes as if to see them off into their final freedom. When they emerged from the lab, the first light of dawn was cutting through the broken windows. Smoke still drifted over the sky of Masarovi. Outside, the surviving soldiers gathered among the ruins. Their faces were worn, but their eyes carried relief. The battle was over. Yet the memory of U-Min would haunt them for the rest of their lives. The story closed with Mark standing atop the ruins of the Masarovi nuclear plant. He watched the first rays of sunlight pierce the thin smoke and felt the lingering cold still clinging to the air.